Introduction. Today we will be discussing the historicity of Jesus Christ based on the documentary The Case for Christ by Lee Strobel. Who was Lee Strobel? Strobel was an atheist journalist who investigated Christianity after his wife became a Christian. His goal was to disprove Christianity, but along the way he began examining historical and textual evidence about Jesus of Nazareth.
Training, my journalism training, and I began to investigate what is the data from history. Again, I tend to be evidentially oriented. I tend to be factually based. And so
In this presentation, we will explore key arguments presented in the documentary regarding whether Jesus existed historically, the reliability of the gospel accounts, and the evidence of his resurrection.
One of the first questions Strobel investigated was whether Jesus actually existed. The documentary argues that the answer depends largely on the reliability of the documents written about him.
But with Jesus, the earliest written records come decades after his supposed death.
Chief among these are the four Gospels: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. The experts interviewed in the documentary point out that these accounts were written relatively close to the events they describe within the lifetime of eyewitnesses who could have challenged false claims. The documentary also highlights the large number of New Testament manuscripts available today. Compared to most ancient historic texts, the New Testament has an unusually large amount of documentary evidence supporting its preservation. This is eternal life, that they may know you, the only true God, and Jesus Christ, whom you have sent. John 17:3.
Continue. Critics often argue that the gospel accounts contain differences and therefore it cannot be trusted. However, this documentary, The Case for Christ, argues that these differences actually cement their credibility, the gospel's credibility. Like eyewitnesses to the same events today, now each writer, Matthew, Mark, John, they recorded different details, yes, but that was based on his perspective while agreeing on the central facts that surrounded Jesus' life, his death, and resurrection. Now, the Bible also presents the gospel as reliable historical accounts. Like in John 21 to 24, it identifies the author as an eyewitness to Jesus' ministry, whilst in Peter 1:16, it states that the apostles did not follow myths, but they were eyewitnesses of Jesus' majesty. Now, together, these points support that the documentaries claim that the gospel accounts were trustworthy historical records rather than fabricated stories.
The discussion then moves beyond the existence of Jesus to the question of his identity. The documentary argues that Jesus fulfilled hundreds of Old Testament messianic prophecies and demonstrated authority through miracles such as healing the sick, controlling nature, casting out demons, and raising the dead. These actions are presented as evidence supporting his claim to divinity.
The Bible is full of over 324 prophecies about the Messiah. Mathematician Peter Stoner calculated that the chance of one person fulfilling just 48 of these is 1 in 10 to the 157th power. That's a 1 followed by 157 zeros. And yet Jesus fulfilled not just 48, but over 324 of these prophecies. It's a mind-boggling miracle.
According to Strobel, the entire Christian faith depends on whether Jesus truly rose from the dead. Several arguments are presented in support of the resurrection accounts. These fact that women were the first witnesses of the resurrection, a detail that added little credibility in the culture of the time. The documentary also discussed the conversion of Paul and James, both of whom were initially opposed to Jesus and his followers. In addition, Paul records that more than 500 people saw the resurrected Christ. Finally, the disciplined endured persecution and, in many cases, death for their belief. The documentary argues that while people for some believe the truth, it is unlikely that they would willingly suffer and that they knew to be false.
What if one historical event could change the course of human history? That is the question explored in The Case for Christ. The documentary presents a Christian apologetic perspective, arguing that historical evidence supports the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. Now, at the same time, historians and scholars continue to interpret this evidence in different ways, reminding us that evidence and interpretation are not always the same. Whether we agree with Strobel's conclusion or not, his investigation encourages us to examine the facts carefully rather than accept or reject claims without thoughtful consideration. Ultimately, The Case for Christ is not only about defending faith. It is an invitation to investigate, to evaluate, and to decide for ourselves. Thank you.